There have been attempts at AI to sort of start writing books, start writing novels. What kind of attempts have been made at that so far?
Well, there are certain programs which can write poems. There are certain programs which can write screenplays. So you can do scripts because the clever writer knows how to touch the buttons of the audience, right? Related to maybe, make the audience cry or do this or do that. The more cleverly you can do that, the more successful, at least in principle, in theory, your screenplay would be. So to a certain extent, a lot of what is artistic is expressible by a program. So a part of it can be captured by a computer program. But what is immortal compositions, if I may use that term, something that stands the test of time, has got to go deeper than that. Now, the moment when I said that part of it can be captured by a program or by certain rules, right? And some of those rules come out of a culture, and that's why certain artistic compositions are culture specific. And there is something which is much more universal. So there are two things that a successful artist must capture. One is, well, it should be able to move a certain audience, but it should also stand the test of time. And therefore, standing the test of time means that it should be able to transcend the boundaries of a specific culture. You read the Greek tragedies, for example, written 2,000 years ago. They're still so powerful, and they've not been equal very often in their power, because they are touching the very fundamental emotions that human beings have. And likewise, the Indian epics, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and they moved people all over. And I don't know whether you've seen this. When we were growing up, there used to be every year Ram Leela.
Right.
Everybody knew the story. Everybody knew what was going to happen.
But we still all went.
But we still all went, and people cried. And that happens even in some great movies or opera.
Yes.
Ultimately, the composition power is in the evocation of the transcendent, because the viewer is one with so-called every man. And the deepest spiritual lesson that there is for a person to learn in their life is that there is no difference between me and you and everybody else. And that's what spirituality is all about, because it's the same spirit which resides in every human being. And of course, the Vedantic view is even more radical, that this spirit is one and we are a part of that unity, which is extremely radical. What could be more revolutionary than that?
Absolutely. From what you're saying, it seems like you're a little bit more pessimistic about the fact that machines could ever sort of emulate this deeper emotional connection that we experience. Do you feel that machines, though, are limited to only emulating the technical aspects of a work, or is there still something else that they're able to capture from what you've seen so far?
Well, machines will capture more and more of what we do, because a large part of what we do is formulaic, is rule-related. So it will certainly do that, and that will bring humanity confront its greatest crisis. Who are we? And so, in a strange way, the more science progresses, the more we are compelled to ask ourselves as to who we are. And there will be a crisis, but the point is that, as the rishis said, that wisdom and understanding can only emerge out of tapas. And tapas is fire, but tapas is also suffering. Right. So I think all of humanity will be going through a period of suffering. That who are we? Because if we can't answer that question, then life is hollow. And a lot of people do feel that life is not worth living, because even though they might have everything, what does it all mean? And we've seen this recently in suicide by very, very prominent people.
Yes.
So wealth, celebrity does not bring happiness. So what is happiness? So going back to your question of Rasa, so what is this essence of happiness which we all are striving for? And of course, perhaps one might assert that machines will not have to worry about that thing, because machines do not have that internal engine, if you will, which is informed by infinity, informed by infinity. And it's wonderful that we should be discussing this under the auspices of the Infinity Foundation.
Absolutely. What a lovely coincidence, in fact.
Right, yes.
So I guess to go back again to artificial intelligence just a little bit more, do you think that artificial intelligence will, looking at it from the other side of the experiencer, will ever be able to discern the rasas? So for example, if you play a dramatic piece in front of a machine, will it be able to tell you this is emulative of hasyaras, this is emulative of virras, etc.? Is that a possibility?
To a certain extent, yes, because you could have pattern recognition modules which would analyze if it's a linguistic piece as to what the pieces are, and so it'll solve a formula, find it whether it rises above a certain threshold, whether it's one rasa or the other. Yes, it could do that to a certain extent, and I think people are already doing it. Politicians do it. They have consultants who analyze their message, and this analysis tells them, well, whether it's going to touch a lot of the people that they're sending their message to. So it will always be a competition between two sides. One is the side related to what extent of our behavior at the individual level and at the collective level is accessible to emulation by machine, and what remains, and what remains which makes us different from machines.
Right.
And there is a huge, amazing tradition within Kashmir, since we did mention Kashmir here also, which is that the more you look at Prakriti, and Prakriti is energy and transformation, which is what we can examine using science, the more we look at Prakriti and try to seek Shiva, who is awareness and consciousness within it, the more we seek it, the further it goes away, and you cannot find it. That's why Shiva is represented by a dot, a point which is as small as you can imagine. So Shiva is always beyond, and this is one of those great paradoxes, and this is a paradox which the creators of quantum mechanics themselves argued for, that the experimenter is also a machine, but the actual experimenter, even if you were to say that part of the eyes, the sight system of the experimenter is also a machine, and you can draw that separation between the subject and the object at wherever you want. The further you go back, it's always beyond. And that is the mystery of the self.
So what you're saying is just being able to discern whether something is hasyaras, that process of classifying something, is not the same as actually experiencing it. And what is that something that you would say is beyond the classification to actually experience? What is it that the machine is missing?
That is the infinite which resides at the very essence of all our interactions. Our interactions are informed by the infinite and by consciousness, by the self. But the self is forever apart from the expression of it. So this is one of those mysteries. And the exploration of this mystery in the decades to come, or in the centuries to come, or the years to come, will be done in so many different ways. And that's the inner space. That's the domain of the inner space, which forever will have an infinity of gifts, so to speak, to give the seeker, so that the world will still be an interesting place, even though we have explored the entire outside domain or outside space. There will be so much of stuff to be explored within.
Can I just ask you, when you say the self, do you mean specifically Atman?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I guess moving into again the realm of possibility, we've seen AI in the last couple of years. There's one in Japan that wrote a novel that almost won their literary award. We've seen one, a Twitter bot developed by MIT Media Labs called Shelley, named after the author Mary Shelley, that's now producing scary stories that people find very frightening. So what is the scope actually for, if AI actually does gain this ability to emulate the rasas, what is the future of the artist? Do we still have a role in society?
Well, the creations of AI with artistic pretensions, if you will, there is a certain element of novelty associated with that, right? But in reality, after the novelty is worn off and people have stopped talking about it, because there's a lot of the stuff which occurs in different bubbles. So people speak about it for a few days or a few weeks and then people move on. Really, there's no evidence that we have that machines can produce something which is of, time-tested value. But certainly a lot of what mediocre artists do is not all that different from what machines do. Certainly, maybe certain compositions can be made, musical, or there's also a lot of writing that human beings do, which ultimately turns out to be very trite.
Right.
So if the computer is producing some trite copy and human beings also do some trite copy, all right, maybe to that extent it's comparable.
So this is a really interesting distinction here. So it seems like what you're saying is that AI can replace something like artisanship, but not actual artistry.
Yes, I think that you put that very well. AI can produce certain kinds of output, which is very valuable. And we see that happening right now. A lot of what machines produce would have been considered fantastic 2,000 years ago, right? Objects, everyday objects that we have at our homes, that we take for granted, that we throw away into trash after we've used them. But 2,000 years ago, people would have said, well, what beauty. So certainly, that's the same idea.
So objects that have had a history of existence already, we know what their form is like, things that are easily replicable, they can easily produce.
Right.
What about things that are a little bit closer to the middle? So for example, commercial film. What is the future for a filmmaker who just wants to make a film that's for commercial purposes, appealing to audiences rather than having a more of an artistic component? For example, just as one example.
Well, I think a lot of that will use machines. For example, autonomous drone cameras, which can do a lot of filming, and then you could have AI editing software, which would reduce the burden on the human editor. I think AI would be used by humans more and more in all kinds of things, even in scientific work, that a lot of the stuff will not be done by humans. In fact, that happens right now in elementary particle research. See, a lot of the stuff when elementary particles are announced, it's being done through computer programs at so many different layers. They are simulating these collisions between particles and so on and so forth, that there is a huge separation between the product that arrives to the reader and the raw data. And I think that will happen at increasing levels in all human actions or activities. And I see AI in that sense becoming more and more pervasive. And we can't stop it because, well, it's useful, so why not use it?
Right. So it sounds like what you're saying, I don't want to sound too flippant about it, but it sounds like what you're saying is that the artist is actually one of the most economically secure jobs of the future, since true artistry can't really be replicated by a machine.
Accepting that true artists are very rare.
Yes, of course.
Yes, so therefore a lot of other artists who are not true artists, maybe they would be driven and forced to reach into their hearts and find the true artist who probably lives within every human being. So maybe people would be encouraged, motivated to do great art more than they would have done otherwise. You know, because we are also creatures of inertia.
Yeah.
We've done something, then we keep on doing that the rest of our lives. But if you're forced, then, well, you would probably do better stuff.
And just to connect it to what we were discussing earlier, the reason why I guess artistry will always have a space, have demand, is because as human beings, we have this innate desire to always reach out for something higher than ourselves. And like you said, experiencing the rasa, experiencing artwork in its truest form is one of the ways that we've done that throughout history. Is that fair?
Yeah. Great art is connecting to the infinite within us,
Right.
Connecting to Shiva within each human being. So that is what we would keep on doing as in a manner where we would take advantage of machines, of AI, and perhaps multiply the effect. You know, a lot of art also involves routine work because, okay, you have a artistic inspiration, but then you have to dress it up. There's a certain craft associated with that. If you could use a machine to help you do that, then perhaps you could focus on the essence, the creative aspect much more. And therefore one can see how it could help a composer, for example. They got a certain idea. Now they use a computer program to dress up that idea into a whole composition in different ways.
Right.
And perhaps writers would do that. And maybe I should do that for my poetry. I'll be more productive, perhaps.
Sure. So we've gone through a lot of different subjects. Would you have any parting thoughts for our viewers as we close this conversation?
Well, I think Vedic ideas, Indian ideas, offer so much more than what we are taught in the university or in college. Because of the fact that a lot of Western theories related to art are behavior driven. They are based on empiricism of one kind or the other, and all empirical systems sort of put the infinite, put the source of inspiration away because it's too complicated to address, and therefore they miss out. Of course, there are in some literary analysis you do it because there's been a movement, or there's been a strand, if you will, not the primary strand, which goes back to Plato. Now here I'm addressing the Western tradition, Plato and maybe Kant in the medieval times. But in India, this is up front, and it addresses it so directly, and it's of such great relevance for our times, because our time is in many ways a time of crisis because of what AI is going to do. If you don't deal with AI the right way, it could lead us to the most horrible dystopia. So how do we prepare ourselves? As an economist, the challenge is, do we have a hard landing or a soft landing?
Right.
If we don't address it the right way, there will be a hard landing. There would be war, there would be famine, there would be this or that. But if we can make use of this wisdom that the Vedas give us, then hopefully we would be able to go along and have a soft landing. And that's what we should do. I think humanity has no other choice.
Thank you for bringing this conversation full circle, Dr. Subhash Kak, and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and making connections that only you could. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Parth.
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here and also hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified. To donate, please click this button.